The twilight sky draped the kingdom in a cloak of silver and violet, the mountains casting long shadows over the forest below. Snow clung stubbornly to the branches, and a cold wind whispered through the trees as though carrying secrets from a distant past. Deep within this frozen land, in a castle of black stone that gleamed even in the faintest light, sat Kale, the albino Alpha King. His hair, as white as freshly fallen snow, framed a face of sharp angles, pale skin, and eyes that pierced like shards of ice. Few dared approach him, and fewer dared speak without trembling. Yet tonight Kyle waited not for a soldier or a courtier, but for something far more unusual, something that would challenge him in ways he had never known. Far from the castle, in a modest home nestled at the edge of the village, Elara sat quietly by the dim fire. Her skin, pale and luminous, caught the flickering light, and her silver-white hair fell loosely over her shoulders. Her parents watched her from across the room, their faces tight with unease. Whispers filled the air like a cold draft. "She brings shame upon the family," her mother muttered, her voice sharp but trembling. "We cannot keep her. No one will accept her." Her father's hand shook as he held a small sack of coins. "There is only one solution. The Alpha King, he buys unusual things. Perhaps he will take her." Elara's heart constricted at their words. She had known fear all her life, but not this. This sense of being sold. Not as a child, not as a daughter, but as a possession to be weighed and measured. She stood quietly, her mind racing. Fear and anger warred within her, but she held her head high. She would not cry. Not yet. When the carriage arrived, black and polished, gliding through the snow like a shadow, Elara felt the first true tremor of destiny brush against her. The soldiers who stepped down from the carriage looked at her with curiosity and caution. She could see the way their eyes lingered, noting her unusual pale skin and silver hair. They were silent as they led her forward, yet she felt a strange pull toward the castle looming ahead. The gates opened with a low groan, revealing the grand hall within. The walls were dark stone, lined with tall, arched windows that let in the pale moonlight. Tapestries depicting battles and old legends hung like frozen memories. At the center of this hall, Kyle waited. His presence was commanding, yet there was a strange quietness about him, a calm that made the air itself hold its breath. Elara stopped a few steps from him, her eyes meeting his. He studied her silently, his gaze intense, almost as if he were trying to see not just her face, but her thoughts, her fears, her strength. "You are the girl they speak of," he said finally, his voice low and rough like distant thunder. "The one who stands out." Elara's lips pressed into a thin line. "I am Elara," she said, her voice steady despite the rapid beat of her heart. "I am no one's shame." Kyle's eyes flickered, perhaps with surprise. Few had the courage to speak to him like that, and even fewer survived the encounter. But in Elara he sensed something unusual. Not fear, not desperation, but a spark of defiance and spirit. "Very well," he said after a pause. "You will stay in my castle. You will serve me, yes, but not as a common servant. You are different, and I have a way of discovering what makes someone powerful." The first days were the hardest. Elara had expected cruelty, and in truth Kale was strict. His rules were sharp, and his gaze never softened. But he was not cruel without reason. He tested her, made her face her fears and her pride, forcing her to think and act in ways that were new and demanding. And though each day was a challenge, there was also an unspoken acknowledgement between them, a silent recognition that neither was simple, neither was ordinary. The castle itself seemed alive. Shadows moved with whispers. The floors creaked like the sighs of old spirits, and sometimes at night, Elara thought she saw shapes moving just beyond her sight. Once, as she walked down a dim corridor, she caught a glimpse of a wolf with eyes like molten silver, staring at her before disappearing into the darkness. She shivered but felt no fear, not exactly. There was a strange familiarity, as though the creature knew her. Kyle noticed her unease, though he never commented directly. His presence was constant, and she felt it like a weight, a shadow, and yet also a kind of safety. She did not understand why, but each time their eyes met, a strange tension passed between them. It was not love, not yet, but it was something electric, something that made her heartbeat stutter. One evening, as snow fell heavier than usual outside, Kale summoned her to the grand hall. Torches flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. He was standing by a window, looking out at the snow-laden trees, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard. "Do you feel it?" he asked. The change in the air? The kingdom is restless. Something is coming, something that seeks to undo all we have built. Ilara shivered. What is it? She asked, though she already felt it in her bones. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, the cold deeper. It is not yet clear, Kyle admitted, but I can feel it. And I think you are part of it. There is power in you, Ilara. You do not know it yet, but it is there waiting, and it may be the key to saving this kingdom. Or destroying it. Ilara stared at him, trying to understand. Power? Key? She had felt powerless all her life, sold by the very people who should have loved her. Could she really hold such importance? Yet as she looked into Kyle's eyes, she sensed the truth in his words. He did not lie, not like others. His gaze was unwavering, honest in a way that frightened and intrigued her all at once. Days passed, and the tension between them grew. Ilara learned the ways of the castle, the quiet corridors, the locked rooms with strange symbols etched into the walls, the libraries filled with books that smelled of ancient dust and secrets. Kale observed her every move, sometimes silently, sometimes with questions that forced her to think, to see, to feel in ways she had never done before. One night, she wandered the castle gardens alone beneath the silver light of the moon. The snow crunched softly beneath her feet, and the wind carried with it the faint echo of something wild. Then she saw it, a wolf larger than any she had seen in the forest, its fur white as frost, its eyes reflecting the moonlight. It did not attack. It did not flee. It simply watched her as though waiting. Kale appeared silently at her side. Do you see it? He asked. Ilara nodded. Yes, it knows me. Kale's gaze followed hers, dark and thoughtful. There are forces in this world older than the throne, older than the mountains. They recognize power when they see it. You may be part of something far greater than either of us imagine. A shiver ran down Ilara's spine, not from the cold, but from the weight of his words. She looked at him. And for the first time, she saw not just the Alpha King, but a man bound by duty, by loneliness, by a need he could not voice. There was a darkness in him, yes, but also a depth, a yearning that mirrored her own. That night, as Ilara lay in the small room assigned to her, the wolf's eyes lingered in her memory. She did not know what the future held, only that her life had shifted irreversibly. She had been sold, yes, but she had also been chosen. And choice, she realized, could be a powerful thing. Outside, the wind howled against the castle walls. The shadows of the forest danced beneath the silver glow of the moon. And somewhere deep within the castle, Kale stood by his window, staring into the night, aware that something monumental had begun. The girl he had purchased, the girl he had tested and observed, was no ordinary girl. She was extraordinary. And together, whether they were ready or not, they would face forces that could shatter kingdoms or forge them anew. The air was thick with anticipation, with danger, and with the unspoken promise of connection. Somewhere in the distant mountains, a shadow moved, silent and knowing. It bowed low, almost as if in recognition. And Kale, watching, understood that the threads of fate had begun to twist around them both, threads that would not be undone. The night deepened. The snow fell harder, and Ilara, far from the life she had known, took her first real breath of freedom and fear. The journey had only begun. The castle sat in silence beneath the pale light of the moon, its towers piercing the night sky like frozen blades. Inside, the halls were quiet, but the air carried an electric tension, as if the stones themselves remembered every secret and whispered warning. Ilara had grown accustomed to the vastness of the castle, yet each shadow, each creaking floorboard reminded her that she was far from the life she had known. She was no longer just a girl sold by her parents. She was a part of something larger, something dark and dangerous that was only beginning to unfold. Kyle observed her often, from the shadowed corners of the hall or the high windows overlooking the snow. His presence was a constant weight, and though she had felt fear at first, it had been replaced by something more complicated: respect, curiosity, and attention that neither could fully name. The wolf had returned that night, larger than before, its silver eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It stood at the edge of the garden, unmoving, as though waiting for her. Ilara stepped closer, her hand trembling slightly, but not from fear. She felt an unspoken connection, as if the creature was a guardian, a messenger, or even a reflection of something within herself. Kyle appeared silently behind her. "It has chosen to follow you," he said. His voice, low and thoughtful, carried no judgment, only recognition. "And perhaps so have you chosen it." Ilara looked at him. "Why does it watch me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because it knows," Kale replied. "It knows what you are, and what you could become. There are forces in this kingdom older than the throne, older than the mountains themselves. They sense power, they sense destiny, and they sense the wrongs that must be set right." Ilara shivered, not from the cold but from the weight of his words. She felt the stirrings of something within her, a quiet strength, a determination she had never known she possessed. The days that followed were a mixture of training, observation, and quiet discovery. Kyle introduced Ilara to the ways of the kingdom, the secrets hidden in the libraries, the meanings behind ancient symbols etched in the walls, the responsibilities of leadership that went beyond fear or force. He did not hold her hand, nor did he shield her from difficulty. Instead, he guided her, testing her mind, her courage, and her judgment. Ilara began to see Kale not only as a king, but as a man weighed down by duty and isolation. His reputation for fearsome strength masked a deep loneliness, a life spent defending a kingdom that trusted him only in fear. And yet, beneath the cold exterior she sensed warmth, a capacity for care that had been buried beneath the burdens of the throne. In return, Kale began to see Ilara in a new light. She was no fragile child, no mere possession. She was sharp, clever, and resilient. Her mind worked in ways that surprised him, and her courage often reminded him of a time when he had dared to hope, to dream, before the throne had consumed him. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, his walls began to crumble, and he realized that he did not just admire her strength. He relied on it, needed it in ways he could not admit. One evening, a sudden alarm echoed through the castle. Shadows moved unnaturally along the walls, and a chilling wind swept through the halls. Kale's soldiers scrambled, their armor clanging against the stone floors. While Ilara followed him closely, fear tempered by determination, a dark figure appeared at the gates, an enemy of the kingdom, a sorcerer whose power rivaled Kale's own. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and he brought with him a darkness that seemed to swallow the corridors. "You," Kale growled, stepping forward. His presence radiated authority, and the air around him seemed to crackle. "You will not enter my kingdom." The sorcerer laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that made the walls tremble. "You cannot stop destiny, Alpha King. The prophecy will unfold. The albino girl will either save you or destroy everything you hold dear." Kale's gaze fell on Ilara. She did not flinch. Instead, she stepped closer to him, her jaw set with determination. "I will not fail," she said, her voice steady. "Whatever is coming, I am ready." The confrontation was not only physical but spiritual. Shadows twisted into shapes, doors slammed, and whispers filled the air. Ilara felt something awaken inside her, a connection to the magic she had sensed from the moment she arrived at the castle. Her heartbeat steadied, her mind focused, and she discovered that she could call upon the strength she had never known existed. Together, Kale and Ilara faced the sorcerer, their powers intertwined. Kale's authority, his command of the forces of the kingdom, blended with Ilara's emerging strength. They moved as one, anticipating each other's actions, trusting in ways neither had expected. In the end, the sorcerer was forced to retreat, his dark power dispersing like smoke in the wind. But the victory came at a cost. Kale looked at Ilara, seeing the strain in her face, the fear that lingered despite her triumph. He reached for her hand, a gesture so simple yet so filled with meaning. "You are incredible," he said quietly, "stronger than I imagined. Braver than most could ever be." Ilara met his gaze, and for the first time she felt a connection that was deeper than fear or respect. It was understanding, trust, and perhaps the beginning of something far more profound. The next days were quieter, but no less intense. Ilara learned to embrace her abilities, discovering that her uniqueness, the very trait that had caused her parents to sell her, was a source of power. She honed her skills, trained with Kale, and began to understand the responsibilities that came with strength. Kale, in turn, began to trust her fully, sharing the secrets of his past, the burdens of his crown, and the loneliness he had carried for so long. He revealed that his rule had been forged in fear, not malice, and that he had always longed for someone who could see beyond his power and understand the man beneath. Ilara, listening, understood that his strength was not only in his authority but in his capacity for change. One night, under the silver glow of the moon, Kyle led Ilara to the highest tower of the castle. Snow fell softly around them, and the kingdom stretched beneath their feet like a world waiting to be reborn. "The prophecy speaks of a union," Kale said, his voice low and reverent. "It says the albino heir and the Alpha King must stand together to save this kingdom. I do not know all of its meaning, but I do know this: whatever comes, we face it together." Ilara looked at him, feeling a warmth she had never known. "Together," she whispered. The word felt powerful, binding like a promise made not with chains but with trust. The wolf appeared once more, standing silently at the edge of the tower. Its silver eyes glowed in the moonlight, reflecting a truth that Ilara and Kale could not yet fully understand. Destiny had placed them here together, and the threads of fate were now intertwined in ways that could not be undone. Outside, the wind howled, and the shadows of the forest danced like living things. Within the castle, Kale and Ilara stood side by side, aware of the dangers yet unafraid. They had discovered each other's strength, and in that discovery lay a power greater than any magic, stronger than fear, and more enduring than the shadows that haunted the kingdom. As they looked over the land, neither could see what awaited them. Prophecies, curses, and the unseen forces of the world stretched beyond the horizon. But they had each other, and that was enough. The kingdom might tremble, the dark might rise, but together, they were unstoppable. And somewhere deep in the snowy forest, a shadow stirred, a force older than the mountains, waiting to see if the union of the albino heir and the Alpha King would fulfill the destiny whispered through centuries. Ilara squeezed Kale's hand, and for the first time since her parents had sold her away, she felt the truth of her own power. She was not weak. She was not alone. She was extraordinary, and Kale, standing beside her, realized that he was no longer just a king of fear. He was a man reborn through trust, courage, and the strength of someone who had been called different, cast aside, and yet had become essential to everything he had fought to protect. The snow fell softly around them. The castle, the forest, the mountains, and the night itself seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the next chapter of a story that had only just begun. The world outside remained dangerous, filled with shadows and whispered threats, but inside the walls of the castle, two souls had found each other, and in that union the kingdom had hope.